Hello everyone, before this video starts, I would appreciate if you guys would leave a like and subscribe, since your support means the world to me and allows me to make these types of videos. Now let's get into the video. The house stood by itself, certainly holding darkness within. I had no doubt that inside, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone, just like any other house. I knew it was not like any other house. My dead parents would be proud. Actually, I had no idea whether they'd be proud. Dead things take on a life of their own in our imaginations and become far more than they ever could have been under different circumstances. I pulled the jacket tighter. There was no point in trying to be discreet, but I'd rather be the weirdo in an unnecessary trench coat than the weirdo who was trying to hide a weapon. I made my way around the structure into the back door without anyone noticing. That wasn't a good thing. We have a way of paying attention to everything except what's important. Grabbing the knob with a gloved hand, I found it to be locked. This was hardly my first time breaking into the house that didn't want me though, so I was inside a few seconds later. I didn't like how quiet the kitchen was. It felt like a presence, as though it was listening. A stifling flutter of vertigo and nausea tickled me as I waded through it. Turning into the hallway, it got worse, like I was diving underwater too quickly. My head spun. The sensation emanated from the last room on the left. Even without light, sound, or smell, it was overwhelming in the absence of what I should have felt. A sudden hitch pulled in my chest. I really didn't want to go into the final room of this suffocating house in the middle of the night. I didn't want to be alone in the dark. I wished I had someone in my life to disappoint. Maybe if I did, I wouldn't have gone forward. And so I found myself slowly stepping around the bedroom door, telling myself that I was ready to face whatever lay on the other side. I wasn't ready. I didn't learn about demons until I was grown up. While some people can see the demons inside of us, they like to stay hidden. Not this one. It stood at the far end of the shadowy room, 9 feet tall, curly goat's horns atop the humanoid feline face of a man. Pugilist arms drooped at both sides, hanging to knees supported by cloven feet. Its tail twitched in time to the flicker of its forked tongue. A little girl, maybe 10 years old, trembled beneath her blanket, her skin alabaster white as her large eyes stared at the nightmare incarnate. Fear chilled my blood. No matter how many times I saw the manifestation of everything vile in my mind, the terror never went away. Fear of death only stops when we're dead. The demon dropped its jaw. 5 inches, 8 inches, a foot, even more to reveal canines that dripped from infected gums to far below its jaw. It lowered its face to the terrified girl. She had nowhere to go. Her bed was in the corner, and the bedroom had no windows. "Stop!" They both turned to me. I could smell the thing's breath from across the room. It reeked like rotting fish had been washed using other rotten fish. I reached into my jacket and grabbed the handle. Our demon huffed, sending swirlies of exhaled air that threatened to melt the wallpaper. I held my breath and pointed the weapon. The thing saw how much the tip trembled. No matter how I tried to steady my hand, it smiled. I blinked rapidly. When it saw that I wasn't going to move, the goat demon lurched toward me. It had expected me to step back. When I didn't do what it wanted, the thing got angrier. It lumbered forward, rising to its full height. It's impossible to appreciate just how tall 9 feet is until a monster is standing right in front of you with its tongue writhing like a tortured snake. But still, I didn't move. Yet it knew I was afraid. The thing could smell it on me, wafting like a freshly opened Octomore whiskey that had all the subtlety of a wrecking ball on fire. I raised the handle higher. The shaky tip of my sword was now just below its chin. This thing had the power to crush me. "Run away!" I peeked around the demon's hyper-muscular frame to see the girl staring at me, the blanket pulled up to her eyes. "You're telling me that I should run away because it knows I'm afraid?" She nodded, her black hair bobbing furiously. The demon dropped its impossibly wide jaw and lowered it toward me. I could see straight past its uvula into a pulsing esophagus. The exit was right behind me. "I am afraid, which is precisely why I can't run." I dropped the sword to the ground with a clang. Staring up at the monster, I spoke louder. This demon's name is Doubt. It lives among us because it will never go hungry in the presence of people. Its teeth stopped half an inch from my cheek. I tried not to cry. This far you may come and no farther. Here is where your proud waves halt. It didn't move. The putrid mouth still was sitting just beside the bedroom door. And yet I stayed. It held for a few seconds longer. And then it screamed. The thing punched a hole in the wall with a single blow that sent shock waves through the air and jolted the girl into a standing position. I wanted to run away, to cry, to do anything but stay in place. But I learned long ago that we're often strongest in our moments of weakness. So I waited for Doubt to tire of us, since I knew it couldn't hurt me as I was. Finally it subsided, heaving as it stared, content for the moment to lurk in the background so that I would always know of its presence. The girl, still trapped in the corner of the room, glared back and forth between us. "Who are you?" she asked in a voice just above a whisper. I had to swallow 3 times before I was sure I could speak without crying. "My name is Peter," I responded, "and I'm a demon hunter like my parents before me." How do you kill this one?" she asked, teetering on the edge of complete panic. I raised an eyebrow. "You want to be rid of it entirely?" She wrapped her arms around a white sleeping gown, looking ghostly, and nodded. "The only certain cure is dying," I answered. "Otherwise, he'll always know how to find you." I plucked my parents' sword from the ground. "In the meantime, try letting go of a weapon. Most people don't know how not to use violence." I held out my hand, inviting her to escape. "Is it safe?" she whispered. "No." She glanced at the demon once more. "Stop staring. It only makes the thing stronger." She continued to stare before leaping from the bed and trotting over toward me and slipping on a pair of shoes by the door. "We're going away, aren't we?" I looked down at her. "You know why it's hunting you?" She looked back up with big brown eyes that only seemed innocent on the surface. "They've come for the most dangerous weapon in the world." The words sent chills down my back. I didn't need to affirm what we both knew. "It's time to leave." She turned at my words and we walked side by side down the hallway, putting the room behind us. We couldn't put it behind us. I felt the demon's first step and I heard the second. Each footfall of ours was met by 2 more, just behind us. "Is it following us?" she whispered. I clenched my fist. "Don't look back. Whatever you do, don't look back." Hot, wet breath caressed my neck as the hair on the back of my head was graced lightly by what felt like a forked tongue. "How can we live like this?" she asked. Her cheeks were shiny. "Well, you never know when life is going to twist the story like an eager titty." We froze. Standing before us in the kitchen was a gray-haired woman in her 60s, taking a long drag on a cigarette. The skin around her eyes wrinkled in a way that made me think she'd spent a lifetime laughing at people facing the consequences of what seemed like a good idea at the time. "Sorry, sugar. I sometimes forget to watch my fucking mouth when kids are around." A million questions raced through my head at the stranger's presence, but only one reached my lips. "Can you see what's behind me?" She looked between the 2 of us, one eyebrow raised like a skeptical proctologist hearing the same lie 100th time. "So it's visible to you," I pressed, my pulse quickening. "Do you know what it is?" She took another extensive drag on the cigarette, clearly more interested in nicotine than self-preservation. "No, but if I could scrub my clothes on its stomach, I'd never use a washing machine again." For the first time since leaving the room, I looked over my shoulder. It was an inch away. The disgusting pubic stubble on its chin raked my neck. "Someone is after her," I explained to the stranger. "Someone is after you, Peter." A shudder went through my bones upon hearing my name. "Why? Who the hell are you?" She took the deepest pull yet on a cigarette that was almost out, closing her eyes before answering. "My name is Patricia Barnes. I like to think of myself as the reciprocation of every testicular-based mistake." I shook my head. There was no way I could even attempt to understand what the hell she was saying. "We need to leave, now." The little girl looked up at me. "What's going to happen?" The first thing that parents learn is how to lie to their children, and the last thing that children do is learn just how much their parents were lying. That's the boundary of adulthood. And our only unifying feature is that we're not ready for it. Kid, this is going to suck, I promised. The demon wormed his tongue into my ear. I ignored it. What's your name? Gwen, she answered. I thought she was going to hold my hand. She didn't. The sun's about to rise, I went on. We need to be gone by then. I opened the back door once again and the two of them followed me out. I didn't check for the dummin because I was looking forward. You found me, I said to Patricia once we were standing in the still night air. They'll find us soon. She snorted. You were only looking at what I wanted you to see. I turned to her and folded my arms as she lit another cigarette. What happened to the last one I was smoking? She asked through clenched teeth. I shook my head, ready to turn away from her. She yanked it from her mouth and blew a long stream into the night air. I set it down just before crossing the room to turn on the pilot light. I opened my mouth to respond. Then I froze, staring. I left it on high, sugar. You'd better run. I grabbed Gwen's hand and sprinted into the trees behind her house. Patricia was surprisingly fast in her high-heeled boots and long skirt. It was clear that she'd been mentally preparing for this. We were hiding behind the trees when the explosion sent shockwaves through us. I turned back to stare at the wreckage. Can anyone else see it? I breathed. I've watched far worse things that no one noticed. Before I received an answer, silhouettes moved against the flames. Two men stared up at the crimson night. One paced back and forth, clearly pissed, while the other stood placidly with his arms on his hips. God, I whispered. They were outside this whole time, waiting for us. I turned to stare at Patricia, who was recovering from her sprint with closed eyes and another inhalation of cigarette smoke, before looking at Gwen. She seemed so vulnerable, pale almost to the point of glowing in the first gray rays of a dawning sun. Patricia sighed. Do you know how many cigarettes I've gone through explaining things to men who should have figured out my motivations the 1,913th time I made it obvious? I folded my arms. That's a random number. She coughed. Not if you put together all the clues. Look, sometimes memories stick better when I slap the listener around a little. Do you need a good smacking? No. Offers on the table. She dropped her cigarette onto the dirt, crushing it beneath her boot as she lit another. Patricia closed her eyes and sighed in contentment. Are you ready for the truth? No one is. She opened her eyes and cackled. Good boy. Looking up toward the two shadows, one still pacing, the other statue still. She pursed her lips. They're not going to give up the most dangerous weapon in the world that easily, she pressed, eyebrows raised. I looked at her, she looked at me, and I think that we finally understood one another. There's no going back, she continued, her voice eerily calm. Peter, this is just the beginning. Thank you for watching the video fully. Please hit the like and subscribe button, since I could not make these videos without your support, and it means the world to me.